There is, however, a very elaborate and learned work, called The History of Initiation, written by a clergyman of the Protestant Church, from which a good deal of light is thrown upon this subject. This gentleman is the Reverend Drive Oliver. All he says may not be strictly correct, but I am satisfied that truth is at the basis of what he has written on the subject, and the Hindu Eleusinian are almost open to our view in the following passage. The periods of initiation, he says, were regulated by the increase and decrease of the moon, and the mysteries were divided into 4 steps or degrees called Char-Asherim, which were equally the dispensers of perfection in greater or less degree. The candidate might perform his first probation at the early age of 8 years. It consisted of an investiture with the zena, or sacred cord of 3 threads, which was explained to refer to the 3 elements, earth, fire, and air, for water according to the Brahmins, is only air in a condensed form. This investiture was attended with numerous ceremonies. Introduction to the Apocalypse. 321. With sacrifices to the solar fire, to the planets, and sea. He was then clothed in a linen garment without seam, such as the Apope Jesus wore, and he was placed under the exclusive care of a Brahmin, who was thence termed his spiritual guide, to be instructed in the necessary qualifications of the 2nd degree. He was inured to hardships, suffered the infliction of rigid penances until he attained the age of 20 years, was restricted from all indulgences, whether carnal or intellectual, and passed the whole of his time in prayer and ablution. He was taught to preserve the purity of body, which was Figura. Tively termed the city with 9 gates or openings. I have heard this phrase used in the same acceptation by some of the lowest classes in the Midland counties in which the soul is imprisoned, by avoiding external defilements, and c. Much of his time was devoted to the study of the sacred books, for a competent knowledge of the institutions, ceremonies, and traditions of religion were an essential qualification for another degree. When he had attained the specified age, if he were found on examination to have made due progress in the mythological lore of the 1st degree, he was admitted to enter on the probationary ceremonies for the 2nd, which was called Jerith. Here his austerities were doubled. He was obliged to support life by soliciting charity. His days were passed in prayer, ablutions, and sacrifice, and his nights in the study of astronomy, and when exhausted demanded repose, he stretched his body under the first tree, snatched a short sleep, and rose speedily to contemplate the skies. In the hot season he sat exposed to 5 fires, 4 blazing around him with the sun above. In the rains he stood uncovered, without even a mantle, when the clouds poured. p. 322. The Book of God. Down the heaviest showers, in the cold season he wore wet clothing, and went on increasing by degrees the austerity of his devotion. In this we see an image of the sublime asceticism which Jesus preached, having himself experienced all these trying ordeals. His probation being at length completed, he was admitted by initiation to participate in the privileges which the mysteries were believed to confer. Sanctified by the sign of a cross T, which was marked on every part of his body, he was subjected to the probation of Pastos, which was denominated the door of Patala or hell. His purification being completed, he was led at the dead of night to the gloomy cave of mystery, which had been duly prepared for his reception. The interior of this holy cavern blazed with a light equal to that of the meridian sun, proceeding from myriads of brilliant lamps. There sat in rich and costly robes the 3 chief hierophants in the east, west, and south. The attendant mystagogues clad in sacred vestments, having their heads covered each with a pyramidal cap, emblematical of the spiral flame or the solar ray, were seated respectfully around. Thus disposed in solemn guise, the well-known signal from the sacred bell summoned the aspirant into the center of this august assembly, and the initiation commenced with an anthem to the great God of nature. The sacred business was then solemnly opened. O mighty being, greater than Brahma, the Holy Spirit, we bow down before thee as prime creator. Eternal God of gods, the world's mansion, thou art the incorruptible being, distinct from all things transient. Thou art before all goods, the ancient, and the supreme supporter of the universe. Thou art the supreme. Introduction to the Apocalypse. 323. Mansion. And by thee, O infinite form, the universe was spread abroad. 26. The aspirant, already weakened by abstinence and mortification, was overawed by the display now exhibited before him, but, resuming his courage during the apostrophe, he prepared himself for the active business of initiation, in some doubts as to what results this unexpected scene would lead. His reflections were interrupted by a voice which called on him to make a formal declaration that he will be tractable and obedient to his superiors, that he will keep his body pure, have a tongue of good report, observe a passive obedience in receiving the doctrines and traditions of the order, and the firmest secrecy in maintaining inviolable its hidden and abstruse mysteries. This declaration, which reminds one of much that is in the Sermon on the Mount, having been assented to, he was sprinkled with water, a mantra or invocation was pronounced over him, or more frequently whispered in his right ear. He was divested of his shoes for that the consecrated ground on which he stood might not be polluted, and was made to circumambulate the spacious cavern 3 times. While performing this ceremony, he was taught to exclaim on his arrival each time in the south, I copieth example of the Zune Messiah, and follow his benevolent course. This being completed, he was again placed in the center, and solemnly enjoined to the practice of religious austerities as the efficient means of preparing his soul for ultimate absorption, and was told that the merit of such works will emit a splendor which renders man superior to the gods. After this admonition, the aspirant was placed under the care of his guru or spiritual guide, and directed to observe a profound silence. 324. The Book of God. During the whole of the succeeding ceremonies, and c. the bewailings for the loss of Sita, the lapse of the soul, the Attis of Cybele, from heaven then began. The aspirant was passed through 7 ranges of dark and gloomy caverns to illustrate the 7 stages of soul's descent. A sudden explosion was heard, which seemed to rend the mountains, whose gloomy recesses there were no exploring, and this was instantaneously followed by a dead silence. Flashes of brilliant light streamed before their eyes, which were succeeded by the blackest darkness. The candidate now beheld shadows and phantoms of various and compound shapes surrounded with rays of light flitting across the gloom, some with many hands, arms, and legs, others without any of those appendages. Here a shapeless trunk, there a human body with the head of bird, beast, or fish, now a human trunk with bestial extremities, succeeded by the body of an animal with the head of a man. These were the initiated, disguised for the purpose, and passing in processional review before him. The various images symbolized the metasomatosis and metempsychosis, also the chaotic condition of things in that sphere wherein the soul or spirit wanders until it is united with its medium. Note 5, page 324. The mystagogues, says Dupuy, make darkness and light successively to appear before the eyes of the initiates. Night the most obscure, accompanied with frightful notes to Book 3. 355. Spectres, is replaced by a brilliant day, whose light environs the statue of divinity. This sanctuary is approached with trembling, where all is prepared to exhibit the spectacle of Tartarus and Elysium. It is in this last stage that the initiated, being ultimately inducted, perceives the picture of beautiful prairies. Enlightened by a clear sky, there he hears harmonious voices and the charming songs of the sacred choirs. It is then that, become absolutely free and disfranchised from all evil, he mixes with the crowd of the initiates, and, his head being crowned with flowers, he celebrates the holy orgies with them. Thus the ancients represented here below, in their initiations, that which would, they said, one day happen to souls when they should be disengaged from bodies, and drawn from the obscure prison in which destiny had enchained them in uniting them to terrestrial matter. Orig. De Taus les Cultes, p. 501. In later ages, the excommunicated, and they who from their crimes found it impossible to gain admission into the true mysteries, invented orgies of their own, in which, as may be supposed, vice took the place of virtue, and every kind of licentiousness prevailed. Paulet writers most wickedly confound the false with the true mysteries, and blame the latter for guilt of the former. Well learn from Psellus what was done in those assemblies. The mysteries of those demons, he says, consisted in representing the fabulous narrative of Jupiter mingling with Ceres and her daughter Proserpine. But as venereal connections take place along with the initiation, a marine Venus is represented as rising from certain fictitious genital parts. Afterwards, the celebrated marriage of Proserpine takes place, and those who are initiated sing, "I have eat out of the drum, I have drank out of the cymbal, I have borne the mystic cup, I have entered into the bed." But the pregnant throes likewise of Ceres are represented, hence the supplications of Ceres are exhibited. After this an image, with the thighs of a goat, makes its appearance, and which at the same time suffers vehemently about the testicles, because Jupiter, in order to expiate the crime of violence which he offered to Ceres, is represented as cutting off the testicles of a goat and placing them on the bosom of Ceres, as likewise on his own bosom. But, after all this, the powers of Bacchus succeed, the sister and the cakes with many bosses like those of a shield. Likewise the mysteries of Sabazius, divinitating, and the priestesses of Bacchus, a certain sound off the Sprotian kettle, the Dodonan brass, another Charybdis and another Proserpine, who are resemblances of demons. After these succeed the uncovering the thighs of Baubo and a woman's comb, for thus, through shame, they denominate the privities of 356. Notes to Book 3. A woman, and thus, in the indecent, they finish the initiation. I have quoted this to warn my readers against the notion that such things ever happened in the incorrupt mysteries. They belong exclusively to the false ones. But it is not quite certain that we can believe all that those writers say. Saint Croix, in his Recherches sur les mystères du paganisme, sect, versus art, IV, denies some of this, though cited by Musaeus from Theodoret. Eusebius declares that Clement of Alexandria, who has stated many things about the interior of the mysteries, knew them by experience. See a typus. Prape, Avang, II, p. 67. If this means that the saint had been initiated, and had mingled in the Saturnalia, it means also that he broke his sacred vows of silence, and committed perjury. And should this be so, can we believe him, though he is a saint? According to Julius Firmicus, on a certain night, while the solemnity in honor of Adonis lasted, an image was laid in a bed, or rather on a bier. After the attendants had for a long time bewailed the death or aphonism of this person, he was at length understood to be restored to life, to have experienced a resurrection, signified by the readmission of light. On this, the priest addressed the company, saying, "Comfort yourselves, all ye who have been partakers of the mysteries of the deity, thus preserved, for we shall now enjoy some respite from our labors." To which were added these words, "I have escaped a sad calamity, and my lot is greatly mended." The people answered by the invocation Io out makhaira, Lampadephoros, hail to the dove, the restorer of light. The gloom which covered the earth upon the aphonism or disappearance of Romulus is remarkable, and meets our notice in several places. On Thede, when Hercules died by female treachery and the poison of the Hydra serpent, or when he ascended a manifest god from Mount Eta, the sun was darkened, pomp, fest, in Herc. When Talos or Orion had met his death by the magical fascinations of Medea, the Argonauts were presently enveloped in that chaotic and preternatural darkness called the Catullus. Upon the fall of Phaethon the sun is represented as veiling his face, officium que negat mundo, till the supplications of the gods prevail upon him to shine again. And lastly, when Memnon, son of the morning, had fallen by some stratagem of the Pelasgians, and the winds had blown away his body, then also did the heavens refuse their light, and the earth was overshadowed. A vestige of this mythos still exists among the Japanese, in the legend of Kombudaxus, who built a magnificent temple, and declared that he would retire into a cavern and sleep 10,000 millions of years, after which he would come. Notes to Book 3. 357. To life again. Accordingly he entered into the cavern, the mouth of which was immediately sealed up, but the Japanese believe that he still lives, and will again reappear. This also is curiously indicated in the flight into Egypt, and the losing and finding again a Jesus in the temple, Luke II, and in the parable of the prodigal.